Is this generic run of Cat6a Ethernet cable as good as an equivalent audiophile Ethernet cable that costs multiples more? Let's talk through that. So a lot of people will tell you on the internet the glorious fountain of knowledge that web is, that these better cables often don't make a difference when you're dealing with digital cables. It's been my experience, however, that is a big myth in the audiophile land. And I don't come at this as an electrical engineer or anybody that's going to sort of break this down into purely scientific or technical terms. But I have learned that better cables do make a difference. Clearly in signal wire, I don't think there's any dispute from that at this point. Clearly in power cables, I don't believe there's any dispute of that at this point either, at least among the more experienced folks that I like to hang out with. But in terms of digital cable, there's always this adage that it's all ones and zeros. But what I have found is that digital audio is really about ones and zeros arriving at the right place and time, right down to single-digit picosecond level. And cables, at the end of the day, even if they're digital, they're still pushing through a square wave, and it's still analog transmission going over that line. And I think there are people that have figured out ways to reduce noise on these Ethernet cables. And today, I had the opportunity to continue my listening to what I think is a fairly wonderful cable, which is the Foundation SX Ethernet cable by Synergistic Research. Now, it's kind of interesting to talk about Synergistic Research because they actually are a company that has proprietary technology, and the founder, who I know fairly well, Ted Denny, doesn't actually talk about what it does. So I think with that sort of lack of transparency on one level, and unwillingness to discuss, which Ted, I think, rightly believes is a trade secret, we don't have any insights into scientifically what is Ted doing with this cable. But we do know from past awards issues and past a long history of decades of reviews in the Absolute Sound and other hi-fi articles and a lot of internet discussion that a lot of these synergistic accessories and cables are quite effective. I'll give you some background about my experience with the brand because I think it's relevant. I started off listening to their Atmosphere cable, and then I have, about a year ago, got Galileo SX, and that was a big step up over Atmosphere Level 4, which I had. And I started having the opportunity to play with a lot of their noise reduction devices, things like the Tranquility Bass, their grounding systems, including the active ground block, which I found to be extremely effective at lowering noise. Their power conditioners, the PowerCell SX in particular, really transformed, I think, the noise out of my system. And then there are the HFTs, which are these little conical devices that you could put up on the wall and sort of vary the way the sound waves interact with that hard surface. And that perhaps, because they're so small, is the hardest thing to take because, or I should say the hardest thing to accept, because when people come into my room and they see these HFTs, they go, okay, Lee's really gone off the deep end. Not sure I like the look of this in general, but these can't possibly be making a difference. Or they look at the black boxes that I have that are in white, that are in two spots, one between the speakers and one sort of off to the left and closer to the listening chair, and they go, how is that impacting bass? You've already got good speakers, Lee. Why do you need that? But the simple fact of the matter is that I've tried a lot of the Synergistic products, and I found all of them to be quite effective, although, at different levels. And if I were to take these HFTs off the wall, I'm standing in my listening room now, the sound would get a lot worse. And I don't really want to do that. I like the best possible sound. I've gone down the rabbit hole with these accessories and tweaks, and I have generally found that they are quite effective. The other thing that's sort of an interesting thing is that when you use better power cables and better signal cables in a system, you really do get elevated performance. And I think that as long as these devices, to my ears, are subjectively making a difference, I'm inclined to keep them in. I'm not someone that will track down. I want to have an explanation. I'm like anybody else. I have a curious mind. I want to understand what scientific basis might be, what forces and physics might be at play here that causes that sound to sound cleaner, more lifelike, more extended in terms of depth and width of soundstage, have more accurate timbre to the instruments. All that stuff's important to me, and I want to have all the dynamics, both macro and micro. But when it comes to digital cables, is an Ethernet cable going to make a difference? Because when those ones and zeros come over, there's error correction. They do that with data packets. So how could an Ethernet cable make a difference? So I decided, I was moving my equipment rack around. I had originally had it in between the speakers, and both Bill Pugh and Peter McGrath at Wilson very diplomatically schooled me on that. That's not exactly ideal if you can move that rack out from between the speakers and off to the side. And Bill's a very big proponent of this, and as it turns out, with a lot of things, Bill Pugh was absolutely right. But as I move that equipment rack off to the left and to the side of my 3 listening chairs in this 15 by 20 by 10 and a half foot room, I needed an extra long run of Ethernet cable, even though right here to my right is a door that is my AT&T UVerse communications closet, if you will. But when you wind up going down from the router, which for some odd reason is located on a shelf halfway up the wall, and wind it around the room, it winds up being a 40 or 50 foot run of Ethernet cable. For giggles, I decided, I'd read a lot of discussion on various audio forums, and I decided, you know what, let me just get the generic Belden sort of blue jeans version of this Ethernet cable. And let's plug that in also, because I think it wound up costing me like $56 or something shipped. So very affordable cable, and it essentially gets the job done. But how much difference would there be between that and a foundation cable that's north of $1,000 for such a long run? What was I going to hear, if anything, with the better Ethernet cable, with having the Foundation SX in the system? Just to give you, to sort of level set in terms of where my system is and give you an idea, hopefully, of sort of that we've got some pretty good resolution. So I think as a reviewer that is doing content for our YouTube channel at TAS, I really want to have a resolving system. And I've spent, I'm old enough, I'm sad to say, that I've probably been messing around with stereo gear since I was 16, which means I've had 4 decades to kind of get my act together on what sounds good. The current system for sources uses a Rossini Apex DAC and clock and transport, Revox PR99 for analog tape that plays 15 IPS that's been rebuilt by Soren Wittrop, and a VPI Scoutmaster, and it's all flowing through preamplifiers and amplifiers from Audio Research, a Ref 3 SE phonostage, a Ref 6 SE line stage, and a Ref 160 S amplifier that powers Wilson Audio Alexia 2 speakers. And the cable systems vary because I'm doing different cable reviews, but the three that I have now that are going through different levels of review are the Synergistic Galileo SX, which I used to test this cable. I thought it would be most fair to have the entire loom done at Galileo SX level. I also have the Anzus D2 and the Shinyata Research Omega and Sigma series in the system. All 3 just terrific cables. But with the Synergistic stuff, I've got more of a complete view because of all the different noise devices that Ted and Andy have sent me of what their technology is capable of, both in terms of everything from isolation footers to tranquility bases to the HFTs and room acoustic things that are on the wall, such as the FEQ generator also has been in play in the system, and the tuning bullets that can help you sort of voice to the system various aspects that you like and sort of vary that. So it's a very tailor-made system, if you will, somewhat of a bespoke cable system, and I've played around with the bullets, and I've got everything at a very fine level. But I wanted really to find out if these digital cables really made all that much of a difference. So what I did was I set up the following. I still have the Ethernet switch from Anzu's, the D2 switch, and I'm running the Ethernet cable from my AT&T router, which is over here in the communications closet, all the way over to the Ethernet switch. So all I'm going to do in this test is I'm going to pull out the generic cable, which I have next to me here, and currently in the system now is the Synergistic Foundation SX cable, and I'm going to talk about what I heard.
Just a brief interruption, esteemed viewers. As you may know, I'm Tom Martin, Chief Content Officer of The Absolute Sound. We have a new product. It's on the Substack platform, and we're going to do some interesting things with Substack. First of which is reader questions and answers. Each Monday, readers will submit questions. We'll pick the most interesting ones and we'll answer the questions on Friday. We'll also have early access to articles and special blogs that don't appear anywhere else. We hope you'll join us. It's only a cost of a cup of coffee per month. Just check on the screen or in the show notes below. Thanks, and now back to the show.
And I went back and forth several times, and I did it over actually a couple of months. And I took copious listening notes. But it really boils down to this. The Foundation SX cable had another level of clarity, but it also had a deeper soundstage. The depth of the soundstage, the correct timbre of the instruments, whether I'm listening to the Leanne LaHavas cover version of Dionne Warwick's Say a Little Prayer, you can hear it's a live recording, you can hear the distinct voices and people whistling in the crowd, and it's like you're at the venue. It's just you're right there. I'm not going to say this is a 50% improvement or a 70% improvement, but it might be a 20% improvement. But it's the small things that I found in audio that add up to things becoming more lifelike and realistic. And so what I'm hearing with this cable is a lot of clarity and a lot of depth, and it just sounds natural. Yes, I'm listening to digital. Yes, I'm listening over a computer, Ethernet line in my router, and I'm listening to both Qobuz and Tidal, both two music streaming services I just love. They're just fantastic, and I'm hearing this level of clarity. Whereas when I put in the Blue Jeans Cat 6A, I'm hearing a lot of smearing in the vocals. I'm hearing when Leanne LaHavas hits the peak on Say a Little Prayer, and it sort of arcs up at one point in the song, it sounds bright with the Blue Jeans. It doesn't sound bright with the Synergistic. I think there's a little bit of brightness maybe in the recording, and maybe the Synergistic's letting a touch of that through, but with the generic cable, I'm hearing a real harshness, and I don't like that. My ears recoil, fear. It's sort of like not what you want to listen to when you're listening to digital. And I think when I listen to things like Dominique Fields and Me when she sings her bird song, I'm hearing much more clarity and body to her voice. When I hear guitar, like The Man in the Long Black Coat, the song that Bob Dylan does, I'm hearing that guitar with a little more, it's a little tangy, it's a little twangy like real guitar sounds like in real life, where it's a little blurred and a little bit homogenized in the generic cable. And I think that's a testament to the engineering work that Ted and his designers have done. It's a test maybe also to the build quality. Andy Wiederspan runs that factory, and every time I've gotten a product, it's been very solid. I've had no product failures at all, and all the different things that they've sent me to come in and try and listen to and produce a review on. So it's a very robust Ethernet cable. It's got very solid connectors on the end, and it does add a level of clarity. And I think that it's a matter of choice. I think, fortunately, a lot of even these more expensive cable lines, they have different levels. They have an entry-level Ethernet cable, they have a mid-level cable, and they have an upper end. The Foundation SX, I think, is more towards the entry-level side, or maybe a little a level or two above it. I'll let Ted and Andy clarify that, but what I'm hearing is not subtle. It is something that once you hear it, you just don't want to take it out of your system. Now, to do a review, I have to take it out. All I did was I disconnected from I did two tests. I did it both with an Ethernet switch included and an Ethernet switch not included. And all I did was I just swapped out the cables. And because I have the closet right here, it's easy for me to just go in the closet, switch out the router end, and then walk back over here, go out to the left side here, and switch the other end, and then plug it in. And because I'm running a Rossini Apex, I can all control it with an iPad, which is right here, through the DCS Mosaic app. But I think if you tried this on other systems, I've certainly been privy to people with systems where they've put in this Ethernet cable as well, and they've gotten similar results. I don't think it's something that's very specific to my system. I think it's just a digital cable does act like an analog cable and can do things with how noise reduction is done, and I think that noise reduction is creating that extra clarity that we hear. So my suggestion is, if you're just using generic Cat 6A cable, you may not know what you're missing. Go try something else. You don't have to go spend thousands of dollars. You can spend, a couple $100 and maybe not even that to get a decent audiophile Ethernet cable. But they do make a difference. And I will tell you right now, the Foundation SX is a really fine cable. It made a huge improvement in my system. And I'm going to keep it. I'm just going to, I'm going to buy it. And I'm going to use this as part of my system. And I don't want to go back to the generic stuff. Once you've heard the better sound, it's very hard to go back if you're somebody that's striving to get the best possible sound. But I would suggest that from a listening and a purely subjective standpoint, you will hear the difference with these better cables. And in particular, the Foundation SX, much like the other products that I mentioned earlier in the review, they're highly effective. And I recommend strongly that you try the Foundation SX line. Thanks for watching. Hope you hit the subscribe button. Hope this has been helpful. It's one man's opinion. You can disagree with it, or you can try things out. But I would suggest at the end of the day, this is more a hobby about exploring. Try new things. Be intellectually curious. Try new things. See what works. Maybe if you find yourself at a trade show, go see one of the demos that Ted Denny does. He does some of the best demos I've seen at these trade shows, where he's just changing one variable and he lets you hear that difference. You make up, it's sort of like you're the judge. You be the judge and you decide. You make up your own mind whether that difference is there. And if it's there, is it worth the cost of admission to get that difference? So it's kind of an interesting hobby because we're just having fun. We're trying new things. And as the hobby progresses in technology, we're hearing very subtle changes in noise reduction. We're hearing noise reduction devices that are new and often weird and unexplainable, but they do make a difference. And at the end of the day, if something brings me closer to enjoying the music, that's a win for me, and I hope it's a win for you. Thanks so much for your time. This is Lee Scoggins from The Absolute Sound. Look forward to seeing you on our next video. Thank you.